Well, hello and good evening. My name is Rory, and you are watching Fireside Fairytales, where we read old fairy tales by the fire with nice calming music. Hopefully everyone can hear me. The computers are telling me that I am visible and audible, but that's not always the truth. If you've never watched this before, or you've never been on this channel before, this is the Varietal. Varietal is a group of writers from Vancouver who just kind of wanted to do something where we... Sorry, I just realized I haven't plugged my computer in. There we go. We just wanted to do something where we had fun with narrative with other people. So today what we're going to do is we're going to read old legendary tales. Specifically, this one's about like Santa and other spirits of Christmas in Western traditions. And on Thursday, we do this thing where you kind of help me write stuff. It's a little sillier. It's called the Varietal Show. It's at 6:30 on Thursday. So if you like higher energy stuff, a little less PBS, Thursday's your day. And ever so often, we do Choose Your Own Adventures, which are sort of special events where you come along and you help choose the adventure. We do a lot of things here. I won't say them all. There's more things we do than that, but those are the main things. What we're going to do tonight, though, is we're going to talk through this book here, the Children's Book of Christmas Stories, which, again, is a digital book that is available through Project Gutenberg for free. So if you have an e-reader or you don't mind reading on your tablet or whatever else, you can read these stories here yourself. That's true of basically every story book I've read on this channel. And what we're going to look at is a few stories. Like they do have a common theme. some of the themes, it was hard to sort of, I feel like they had stuff in common, but it was hard to really articulate. So you get this kind of vague title, and unfortunately vague titles don't usually draw people in. So I imagine we'll have a small crowd. And also, I will be the first to admit that our icon today didn't look amazing, but I purely chose it because I thought that deer was so fluffy and adorable. Even though it's kind of center of it's breaking rules of thirds and like it's got problems design-wise, but I really like the deer. So, yeah, I'm going to read some stories here. I hope everyone's doing okay today. If you're out there lurking, or if you're curious and want to ask questions of me, or provide your own comments on the story as they unfold, feel free to jump into our live chat. As long as you have a YouTube account, you'll be able to use it. There's nothing special about it. You can see GS is in there and says, I'm in a Christmas mood. That's good. I have my Christmas lights up. You can't see them, but I'm in a room full of Christmas lights. So we're going to look at a collection today. This collection we may actually pull some stories from again next week, but it's just a variety of stories, apparently for children. Some of them, they're not for children, at least not modern day children, but that's not unusual. It includes everything from Charles Dickens to Hans Christian Andersen, who we read a bunch of 2 weeks ago, to some authors I've never heard of. There's quite a few here. There's the sister to the author of Robin Hood in his Merry Men has an entry in here, who apparently was a notable writer in her own right. But it was put together by Asadon Dickinson, and Ada M. Skinner. And it's quite a few stories. We are going to start with a very short one that I think is delightful. It is a meshing of Western sort of Christian traditions, because of course Christmas is a Christian holiday. Not that the solstice, where it's the time that it's situated in, it's not that it's the only holiday that occurs at that time. We've talked about that in previous weeks. But Christmas specifically, that title, not Winter Festival, of course, is a Christian holiday. So when we're reading Christmas stuff, especially from the eras that we're reading, it's going to be a heavy Christian influence. Just a heads up in case you wonder why. So the first one we're going to read here is Legend of Babouscka, which is a meshing of Christian tradition and Russian. Now, I have no idea how widespread this story actually is. It's extremely short, but it is a lovely little tale. I'll just let you hear it, and then we can discuss it, I suppose. This is the Legend of Babouscka, a Russian tale sort of fused with Western Christianity. Well, maybe Eastern. It was the night the dear Christ child came to Bethlehem. In a country far away from him, an old woman named Babouscka sat in her snug little house by her warm fire. The wind was drifting the snow outside and howling down the chimney, but it only made Babouscka's fire burn more brightly. "How I am glad that I may stay indoors," said Babouscka, holding her hands out to the bright blaze. But suddenly she heard a loud rap at her door. She opened it, and her candle shone on 3 old men standing outside in the snow. Their beards were as white as the snow and so long that they reached the ground. Their eyes shone kindly in the light of Babouscka's candle, and their arms were full of precious things, boxes of jewels, and sweet-smelling oils and ointments. "We've traveled far, Babouscka," they said, "and we stopped to tell you of the baby prince born this night in Bethlehem. He comes to rule the world and teach all men to be loving and true. We carry him gifts. Come with us, Babouscka." But Babouscka looked at the drifting snow, and then inside at her cozy room in the crackling fire. "It is too late for me to go with you, good sirs," she said. "The weather is too cold." She went inside again and shut the door, and the old men journeyed on to Bethlehem without her. But as Babouscka sat by her fire, rocking, she began to think about the little Christ child, for she loved all babies. "Tomorrow I will go to find him," she said. "Tomorrow, when it is light, I will carry him some toys." So when it was morning, Babouscka put on her long cloak and took her staff and filled her basket with pretty things that a baby would like, gold balls and wooden toys and strings of silver cobwebs, and she set out to find the Christ child. But Babouscka had forgotten to ask the 3 old men the road to Bethlehem, and they traveled so far through the night that she could not overtake them. Up and down the road she hurried, through woods and fields and towns, saying to whomsoever she met, "I've got to find the Christ child. Where does he lie? If I bring some pretty toys for his sake." But no one could tell her the way to go, and they all said, "Farther on, Babouscka, farther on." So she traveled on for years and years, but she never found the little Christ child. They say that old Babouscka is still traveling, looking for him. When it comes Christmas Eve and the children are lying fast asleep, Babouscka comes softly through the snowfields and towns, wrapped in her long cloak and carrying her basket on her arm. With her staff she raps gently at the doors and goes inside and holds her candle close to little children's face. "Is he here?" she asks. "Is the little Christ child here?" And then she turns sorrowfully away, again crying, "Farther on, farther on." But before she leaves, she takes a toy from her basket and lays it beside the pillow for a Christmas gift. "For his sake," she says softly, and then hurries on through the years and forever in search of the little Christ child. And that is the story of Babouscka. Jess says, "Years? Ah, yeah. I mean, try not to think too deeply on the idea that the 3 wise men were in Russia." That would be quite the trip for that era. To make it to Bethlehem from any part of Russia, frankly. The closest points of Russia still. All right. So that's our first story. It's a very short story, but it is one of my favorite style of stories that we get, because these stories are, real legends are very short, but they leave like so much to the imagination. You know, they open up a world of unseen possibilities, I guess you could say. And the idea that there is this woman you might meet when you're a kid in particular is really engaging. And I do like the way that they draw in the imagination. Gia says, oh, that's a lovely story. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Okay, well, the other ones are longer, so we don't want to spend too much time on that. The next one is, well, it's a little odd. It has a moment in it that is particularly strange to me. We'll see if you agree. It is kind of in keeping with, I guess it's in keeping with the fairy tale tradition of just these, as I was saying in the advertising on Instagram and Twitter for this stream, these like stabs of reality that they jab into these old Victorian fairy tales, where like you're going along and everything is like glowing with golden dust of the, you know, great queen of the fairies. And then, you know, she gets cancer or something, and you're like, what? Where did that come from? I feel like there's a lot of that in this tale. All right. Sorry, I smelled something very odd for a moment. Hopefully it's not a fire. It just smelled hot. Or my computer giving up on things. Okay, so Jimmy Scarecrow's Christmas is the name of this next story. And it is by Mary E. Wilkins Freeman. Jimmy Scarecrow led a sad life in the winter. Jimmy's greatest grief was his lack of occupation. He liked to be useful, and in winter he was absolutely of no use at all. He wondered how many such miserable winters he would have to endure. He was such a young Scarecrow, and this was the first one. He was strongly made, and although his wooden joints creaked a little when the wind blew, he did not grow in the least rickety. Every morning, when the wintry sun peered like a hard yellow eye across the dry corn stubble, Jimmy felt sad, but at Christmas time his heart nearly broke. Corn stubble, by the way, an amazing image. On Christmas Eve, Santa Claus came in his sledge heaped high with presents, urging his team of reindeer across the field. And on his way to the farmhouse where Betsy lived with her Aunt Hannah. Oh, why is this so hot? Just a moment. Oh dear. I found what was smoking. Well, we'll see how long my battery lasts on my computer, because my adapter, my charging block, apparently has a short. Let's carry on. I do have some charge. I have 80%. I should be okay. Sorry about the interruption there. But at Christmas time, his heart nearly broke. On Christmas Eve, Santa Claus came in his sledge heaped high with presents, urging his team of reindeer across the field. He was on his way to the farmhouse where Betsy lived with her Aunt Hannah. Betsy was a very good little girl with very smooth yellow curls, and she had a great many presents. Santa Claus had a large wax doll baby for her on his arm, tucked up against the fur collar of his coat. He was afraid to trust it in the pack lest it get broken. When poor Jimmy Scarecrow saw Santa Claus, his heart gave a great leap. "Santa Claus, here I am!" he cried out, but Santa Claus did not hear him. "Santa Claus, please give me a little present. I was good old summer and kept the crows out of the corn." He pleaded the poor Scarecrow in his choking voice, but Santa Claus passed with a merry halloo and a great clamor of bells. Then Jimmy Scarecrow stood in the corn stubble and shook with sobs until his joints creaked. "I'm of no use in the world, and everybody has forgotten me," he moaned, but he was mistaken. The next morning, Betsy sat at the window holding her Christmas doll baby. and she looked out at Jimmy Scarecrow standing alone in the field amidst the corn stubble. "Aunt Hannah," she said. Aunt Hannah was making a crazy patchwork quilt. She frowned hard, a triangular piece of red silk and circular piece of pink, wondering how to fit them together. "Well," said she, "did Santa bring the Scarecrow any Christmas present?" "No, of course he didn't." "Why not?" "Because he's a scarecrow. Don't ask silly questions." "I wouldn't like to be treated so. If I was a scarecrow," said Betsy, but her Aunt Hannah would not hear it. She was busy cutting a triangular snip out of the round piece of pink silk, so the red piece of red silk could be feather-stitched into it. It was snowing hard out of doors, and the north wind blew. The Scarecrow's poor old coat got whiter and whiter with snow. Sometimes he almost vanished into the thick white storm. Aunt Hannah worked until the middle of the afternoon on her crazy quilt. Then she got up and spread it out over the sofa with an air of pride. "There," she said, "that's done. That makes the 8th. I've got one for every bed in the house, and I've given 4 away. I'd have given this away if I'd knew anybody who wanted it." Aunt Hannah put on her hood and shawl and drew some blue yarn stockings on over her shoes, and set out through the snow to carry a slice of plum pudding to her sister Susan, who lived down the road. Half an hour after Aunt Hannah had gone, Betsy put her little red plaid shawl over her head and ran across the field to Jimmy Scarecrow. She carried her new doll baby smuggled up under her shawl. "Wishing you a Merry Christmas," she said to Jimmy Scarecrow. "Wishing you the same," said Jimmy, but his voice was choked with sobs and was also muffled, for his old hat slipped down to his chin. Betsy looked pitifully at the old hat fringed with icicles like frozen tears, and the old snow-laden coat. "I've brought you a Christmas present," said she, and with that she tucked her doll baby inside Jimmy Scarecrow's coat, sticking its tiny feet into a pocket. "Thank you," said Jimmy Scarecrow faintly. "You're welcome," said she. "Keep her under your overcoat so the snow won't wet her, and she won't catch a cold. She's delicate." "Yes, I will," said Jimmy Scarecrow. Let's get a drink of water here. And he tried to bring one of his stiff, outstretched arms around to clasp the doll baby. "Don't you feel cold in that summer coat?" asked Betsy. "If I'd had a little exercise, I should be warm," he replied, but he shivered and the wind whistled through his rags. "You wait a minute," said Betsy, and was out across the field. Jimmy Scarecrow stood in the corn stubble with the doll baby under his coat and waited. And soon Betsy was back again with Aunt Hannah's crazy quilt trailing in the snow behind her. "Here," she said, "here is something to keep you warm." She folded the crazy quilt around the Scarecrow and pinned it. Aunt Hannah wants to give it away if anybody wants it," she explained. "She's got so many crazy quilts in the house, she doesn't know what to do with them. Goodbye. Be sure to keep the doll baby covered up." And with that, she ran across the field and left Jimmy Scarecrow alone with the crazy quilt and the doll baby. The bright flash of colors under Jimmy's hat brim dazzled his eyes, and he felt a little alarmed. "I hope this quilt is harmless. If it is crazy," he said, but the quilt was warm, and he dismissed his fears. Soon the doll baby whimpered, but he creaked his joints a little, and that amused it, and he heard it cooing inside his coat. Jimmy Scarecrow had never felt so happy in his life as he did for an hour or so, but after that the snow began to turn to rain, and the crazy quilt was soaked through and through, and not only that, but his coat and the poor doll baby, it cried pitifully for a while, and then it was still, and he was afraid it was dead. It grew very dark, and the rain fell in sheets. The snow melted, and the Jimmy Scarecrow stood halfway up his old boots in water. He was saying to himself that the saddest hour of his life had come, when suddenly he heard again Santa Claus' sleigh bells and his merry voice talking to his reindeer. It was after midnight, Christmas was over, and Santa was hastening home to the North Pole. "Santa Claus, dear Santa Claus!" cried Jimmy Scarecrow with a great sob, and that time Santa Claus heard him and drew rein. "Who's there?" he shouted out of the darkness. "It's only me," replied the Scarecrow. "Who's me?" "Jimmy Scarecrow." Santa got out of his sledge and waded up. "Have you been standing here ever since the corn was ripe?" he asked pityingly, and Jimmy replied that he had. "What's that over your shoulders?" Santa Claus continued, holding up his lantern. "It's a crazy quilt." "And what are you holding under your coat?" "The doll baby that Betsy gave me, and I'm afraid it's dead." Poor Jimmy Scarecrow sobbed. A children's book of Christmas stories, by the way, folks. If you were thinking of the title, it's clearly a children's book of Christmas stories with your dead baby. "Nonsense!" cried Santa Claus. "Let me see it." And with that, he pulled the doll baby out from under Scarecrow's coat and patted its back and shook it a little, and it began to cry and then to crow. "It's all right," said Santa Claus. "This is the doll baby I gave Betsy, and it is not at all delicate. It went through the measles and the chicken pox and the mumps and the whooping cough before it left the North Pole. I think Santa needs a vaccine mandate if that's going on at the North Pole." "Now get into the sledge, Jimmy Scarecrow. Bring the doll baby and the crazy quilt. I've never had any quilts that weren't in their right minds at the North Pole, but maybe I can cure this one. Get in." Santa chirruped to his reindeer, and they drew the sledge up close in a beautiful curve. "Get in, Jimmy Scarecrow, and come with me to the North Pole," he cried. "Please, how long shall I stay?" said Jimmy Scarecrow. "Why, you are going to live with me," replied Santa Claus. "I've been looking for a person like you for a long time." "Are there any crows to scare away at the North Pole? I want to be useful." Jimmy Scarecrow said anxiously. "No," answered Santa Claus, "but I don't want you to scare away crows. I want you to scare away Arctic explorers. I could keep you in work for 1,000 years. Scaring away Arctic explorers from the North Pole is much more important than scaring away crows from corn. I mean, much more important to Santa. I don't know about, if you're a farmer, who cares? Why, if they found the pole, there wouldn't be a piece an inch long left in a week's time, and the earth would cave in like an apple without a core. They would whittle it all down to pieces and carry it away in their pockets for souvenirs. Come along, I'm in a hurry." "I will go on 2 conditions," said Jimmy. "First, I want to make a present to Aunt Hannah and Betsy next Christmas." "You shall make them a present you choose. What else?" "I want some way provided to scare the crows out of the corn next summer while I am away," said Jimmy. "This is easily managed," said Santa Claus. "Just wait a minute." And Santa took his stylographic pen out of his pocket, went with his lantern close to one of the fence posts, and wrote these words upon it. "Notice to crow. Whichever crow shall hereafter hop, fly, or flop onto this field during the absence of Jimmy Scarecrow, and therefore purloin, steal, or abstract coin, shall be instantly, in a twinkling and a trice, turned Snow White, and be ever after a disgrace, a byword, and a reproach to his whole race. Per order of Santa Claus." "The corn will be safe now," said Santa Claus. "Get in." Jimmy got into the sledge, and they flew away over the fields, out of sight, and with merry halloos and great clamor of bells. The next morning there was much surprise at the farmhouse when Aunt Hannah and Betsy looked out the window, and the Scarecrow was not in the field, holding out his stiff arms over the corn stubble. Betsy had told Aunt Hannah she'd given away the crazy quilt and the doll baby, but had been scolded very little. "You must not give away anything of yours again without asking permission," said Aunt Hannah. And you have no right to give anything of mine, even if you know I don't want it. Now both my pretty quilt and your beautiful doll baby are spoiled." That was all Aunt Hannah had to said. She thought she would send John after the quilt and the doll baby the next morning as soon as it was light. By the way, no idea who John is. They never introduced him, never comes up again. I think you're supposed to just assume it's the husband? But Jimmy Scarecrow was gone, and the crazy quilt and the doll baby with him. Oh, there it is. That's right. I forgot his name was John. Yes. There's a servant man who comes in the halfway here. But there's very little said about him. John, the servant man, searched everywhere, but not a trace of them could he find. "They must have all blown away, Mum," he said to Aunt Hannah. "We shall have another scarecrow next summer," said she. But the next summer there was no need of a scarecrow, for not a crow came past the fence posts on which Santa Claus had written his notice to crows. The cornfield was never so beautiful, and not a single grain was stolen by a crow, and everybody wondered at it, for they could not read the crow language in which Santa had written. "It is a great mystery to me why the crows don't come into our cornfield when there is no scarecrow," said Aunt Hannah. But she had a still greater mystery to solve when Christmas came around again. Then she and Betsy each had a strange present. They found them in the sitting room on Christmas morning. Aunt Hannah's present was her old crazy quilt, remodeled with every piece cut square and true, and matched exactly to its neighbor. "Why, it's my old crazy quilt! But it isn't crazy now," cried Aunt Hannah, and her very spectacles seemed to glisten with amazement. Betsy's present was her doll baby of the Christmas before, but the doll was a year older. She'd grown an inch and could walk and say, "Mama," and "How do?" She changed a good deal, but Betsy knew her at once. "It's my doll baby," she cried, and snatched her up and kissed her. But neither Aunt Hannah nor Betsy ever knew that the quilt and the doll were Jimmy Scarecrow's present to them. GSS crow language, I love it. Yes, I thought that was a bit of a delightful idea. Where are we at for time? Oh, we're doing pretty good for time. Okay. I mean, we'll see how we doing on. Well, we've gone through about half of our battery life. Let's see if I can do some things to preserve it. Old Father Christmas. Now this last one, a little longer, so it should put up at the right time. It is also a little more serious, a little more grounded. That's why I kind of put it last. So if you're just in for sort of goofy children's fairy tales, this would probably be a good getting off point. It does have a kind of, it's kind of magical realism, where it's a little bit unclear as to how much the children's perceptions of things are accurate or not. It's called Old Father Christmas by J.H. Ewing, who was apparently an inspiration to Rudyard Kipling. And Edith Nesbit, who we've read stories from in the past, stories about dragons, she did. This was several months ago. Old Father Christmas by J.H. Ewing. The custom of Christmas trees came from Germany. I could remember when they were first introduced into England, and what wonderful things we thought them. Now every village school has its tree, and the scholars openly discuss whether the presents have been good or mean, as compared with other trees in former years. The first one that I ever saw I believed to have come from good Father Christmas himself, but little boys have grown too wise now to be taken in for their own amusement. They are not excited by secret and mysterious preparations in the back drawing room. They hardly confess to the thrill, which I feel to this day, when the folding doors are thrown open and amid the blaze of tapers, Mamma, like a fate, advances with her scissors to give everyone what falls to his lot. Well, young people, when I was 8 years old, I had not seen a Christmas tree. and the first picture of one I ever saw was the picture of that held by old Father Christmas in my godmother's picture book. "What are those things on the tree?" I asked. "Candles," said my father. "No, father, not the candles, the other things." "Those are toys, my son." "Are they ever taken off?" "Yes, they are taken off and given to the children who stand around the tree." Patty and I grasped each other by the hand with one voice murmured, "How kind of old Father Christmas." By and by I asked, "How old is Father Christmas?" My father laughed and said, 1,830 years, child, which was then the year of our Lord, and thus 1,830 years since the first great Christmas day. "He looks very old," whispered Patty, and I, who was for my age what Kitty called Bible learned, said thoughtfully with some puzzledness of mind, "Then he's older than Methuselah." But my father had left the room and did not hear my difficulty. November and December went by, and still the picture book kept all its charm for Patty and me, and we pondered on and loved old Father Christmas as children can love and realize a fancy friend. To those who remember the fancies of their childhood, I need say no more. Christmas week came, Christmas Eve came. My father and mother were mysteriously and unaccountably busy in the parlor. We had only one parlor, and Patty and I were not allowed to go in. We went into the kitchen, but even here was no place of rest for us. Kitty was all over the place, as she phrased it, and cakes, mince pies, puddings were with her, as she justly observed. There was no place there for children and books to sit with their toes in the fire, when a body wanted to be at the oven all along. The cat was enough for her temper, she added. As to Puss, who obstinately refused to take a hint, which drove her out into the which drove her out into the Christmas frost, she returned again and again with soft steps and a stupidity that was, I think, affected to the warm hearth, only to fly at intervals like a football before Kitty's hasty slipper. We had more sense or less courage. We bowed to Kitty's behests and went to the back door. Patty and I were hardy children and accustomed to run out in all weathers, without much extra wrapping up. We put Kitty's shawl over our two heads and went outside. I rather hoped to see something of Dick, for it was holiday time, but no Dick passed. He was busy helping his father to bore holes in the carved seats of the church, which were to hold sprigs of holly for the morrow. That was the idea of church decoration in my young days. You've improved on your elders there, young people, and I am candid enough to allow it. Still, the sprigs of red and green were better than nothing, and like your lovely wreaths and pious devices, they made one feel as if the old black wood were bursting into life and leaf again for very Christmas joy. And if only one knelt carefully, they did not scratch his nose. Well, Dick was busy and not to be seen. We ran across the little yard and looked over the wall at the end to see if we could see anything or anybody. From this point there was a pleasant meadow field sloping prettily away to a little hill about 3/4 of a mile distant, which, catching some fine breezes from the moors beyond, was held to be a place of cure for whooping cough or king cough, as it was vulgarly called. Up to the top of this Kitty had dragged me and carried Patty. When we were recovering from the complaint, as I well remember, it was the only change of air we could afford, and I dare say it did as well as if we had gone into badly drained lodgings at the seaside. This hill was now covered with snow and stood off against the grey sky. The white fields looked vast and dreary in the dusk. The only gay things to be seen were the berries of the holly hedge in the little lane, which, running by the end of our backyard, led up to the hall, and the fat robin that was staring at me. I was looking at the robin when Patty, who had been peering out of her corner of her kitty's shawl, gave a great jump that dragged the shawl from our heads and cried, "Look!" I looked. An old man was coming along the lane. His hair and beard were as white as cotton wool. He had a face like the sort of apple that keeps well in winter. Just gonna actually have a drink of water. There was snow about him in patches, and he carried a small fir tree. The same conviction seized upon us both. With one breath, we exclaimed, "It's old Father Christmas!" I know now that it was only an old man of the place with whom we did not happen to be acquainted, and that he was taking a little fir tree up to the hall to be made into a Christmas tree. He was a very good-humored old fellow and rather deaf, for which he made up by smiling and nodding his head a good deal and saying, "Aye, aye, to be sure," at likely intervals. As he passed us and met our earnest gaze, he smiled and nodded so earnestly that I was bold enough to cry, "Good evening, Father Christmas!" "Same to you," said he in a high-pitched voice. "Then you are Father Christmas," said Patty. "And a Happy New Year," was Father Christmas's reply, which rather put me out. But he smiled in such a satisfactory manner that Patty went on, "You're very old, aren't you?" "So I be, miss, so I be," said Father Christmas, nodding. "Father says you're 1,830 years old," I mothered. "Aye, aye, to be sure," said Father Christmas. "I'm a long age." A very long age, thought I, and I added, "You're nearly twice as old as Methuselah, you know," thinking that this might have struck him. "Aye, aye," said Father Christmas, but he did not seem to think anything of it. After a pause, he held up the tree and cried, "Do you know what this is, little miss?" "A Christmas tree?" And the old man smiled and nodded. I leant over a wall and shouted, "There are no candles!" "By and by," said Father Christmas, nodding as before. "When it's dark, they'll all be lighted up. That'll be a fine sight." "Toys, too, there'll be, won't there?" said Patty. Father Christmas nodded his head. "And sweeties," he added expressively. I could feel Patty trembling, and my own heart beat fast. The thought which agitated us both was this: was Father Christmas bringing the tree to us? But every anxiety and some modesty also kept us from asking outright. Only when the old man shouldered his tree and prepared to move on, I cried in despair, "Oh, are you going?" "I'm coming back by and by," said he. "How soon?" cried Patty. "About 4 o'clock," said the old man, smiling. "I'm only going up yonder." Up yonder? This puzzled us. Father Christmas had pointed, but so indefinitely that he might have been pointing to the sky, or the fields, or the little wood at the end of the squire's grounds. I thought the latter, and suggested to Patty that perhaps he had some place underground, like Aladdin's cave, where he got the candles and all the pretty things for the tree. This idea pleased us both, and we amused ourselves by wondering what old Father Christmas would choose for us from his stores in that wonderful hole where he dressed like his Christmas trees. "I wonder, Patty," said I, "why there's no picture of Father Christmas's dog in the book." For at the old man's heels in the lane there crept a little brown and white spaniel, looking very dirty in the snow. "Perhaps it's a new dog that he's got to take care of his cave," said Patty. When we went indoors, we examined the picture afresh by the dim light from the passage window, but there was no dog there. My father passed us at this moment and patted my head. "Father," said I don't know, but I do think old Father Christmas is going to bring us a Christmas tree tonight." "Who's been telling you that?" said my father. But he passed on before I could explain that we had seen Father Christmas himself, and had had his word for it, and he would return at 4 o'clock, and that the candles on his tree would be lighted as soon as it was dark. We hovered on the outskirts of the rooms till 4 o'clock came. We sat on the stairs and watched the big clock, which I was just learning to read, and Patty made herself giddy with constantly looking up and counting the 4 strokes, toward which the hour hands moved slowly. We put our noses to the kitchen now and then to smell the cakes and get warm, and anon we hung about the parlor door, and were mostly unjustly accused of trying to peep. What did we care about what our mother was doing in the parlor? We, who had seen old Father Christmas himself, and were expecting him back every moment. Again, every moment, sorry. At last the church clock struck. The sounds boomed heavily through the frost, and Patty thought there were 4 of them. Then after due choking and worrying, and our own clock struck, and we counted the strokes quite clearly. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we got Kitty's shawl once more, and stole out into the little backyard. We ran out to our old place and peeped, but we could see nothing. "We'd better get up on the wall," I said, and with some difficulty and distress from rubbing her bare knees against the cold stone and getting the snow up her sleeves, Patty got on to the coping of the little wall. I was just struggling after her when something warm and something cold, coming suddenly against the bare calves of my legs, made me shriek with fright. I came down with a run and bruised my knees, my elbows, and my chin, and the sun that hadn't gone up... and the snow that hadn't gone up Patty's sleeves went down my neck, boy. Then I found that the cold thing was a dog's nose and the warm thing was his tongue. And Patty cried from her post of observation, "It's Father Christmas's dog! He's licking your legs!" It really was the dirty little brown and white spaniel, and he persisted in licking me and jumping on me and making curious little noises that must have meant something if one had known his language. I was rather harassed at the moment. My legs were sore, and I was a little afraid of the dog. And Patty was very much afraid of sitting on the wall without me. "You won't fall," I said to her. "Get down, will you?" I said to the dog. "Humpty Dumpty fell off a wall," said Patty. "Bow wow," said the dog. I pulled Patty down, and the dog tried to pull me down. But when my little sister was on her feet, to my relief, he transferred his attentions to her. When he jumped at her and licked her several times, he turned around and ran away. "He's gone," said I. "I'm so glad." But even as I spoke, he was back again, crouching at Patty's feet and glaring at her with eyes and the color of his ears. Now, Patty was very fond of animals, and when the dog looked at her, she looked at the dog, and then she said to me, "He wants us to go with him." On which, as if he understood our language, though we were ignorant of his, the spaniel sprang away, and went off as hard as he could, and Patty and I went after him. A dim hope crossed my mind. Perhaps Father Christmas has sent him for us. The idea was rather favored by the fact that he led us up by the lane, only a little way. Then he stopped by something lying in the ditch, and once more we cried in the same breath, "It's old Father Christmas!" Returning from the hall, the old man had slipped upon a bit of ice and lay stunned in the snow. Patty began to cry. "I think he's dead," she sobbed. "He's so very old, I don't wonder," I murmured, "but perhaps he's not. I'll fetch Father." My father and Kitty were soon on the spot, and Kitty was as strong as a man, and they carried Father Christmas between them into the kitchen, and there he quickly revived. I must do Kitty justice to say that she did not utter a word of complaint at the disturbance of her labors, and that she drew the old man's chair close to the oven with her own hand. She was so much affected by the behavior of his dog that she admitted him even to the hearth, on which Puss, being acute enough to see how matters stood, lay down with her back so close to the spaniels that Kitty could not expel one without kicking both. For our parts, we felt sadly anxious about the tree. Otherwise, we could have wished for no better treat than to sit at Kitty's round table taking tea with Father Christmas. Our usual fare of thick bread and treacle was tonight exchanged for a delicious variety of cakes, which were none the worse to us for being tasters and wasters, that is, little bits of dough or shortbread put in to try the state of the oven, and certain cakes that had gotten broken or burnt in the baking. Well, there we sat, helping old Father Christmas to tea and cake, and wondering in our hearts what could have become of the tree. Patty and I felt a delicacy in asking old Father Christmas about the tree. It was not until we had had tea 3 times round, and tasters and wasters to match, that Patty said very gently, "It's quite dark now," and then she heaved a deep sigh. Burning anxiety came over me. I leaned toward Father Christmas and shouted. I had found out that it was needful to shout. I suppose candles are on the tree now? Just about putting 'em on, said Father Christmas. And the presents, too, said Patty. Aye, to be sure, said Father Christmas, and he smiled delightfully. I was thinking what further questions to ask, questions I might venture upon, when he pushed his cup toward Patty, saying, Since you're pressing, miss, I'll take another dish. And Kitty, swooping on us from the oven, cried, Make yourself at home, sir. There's more where these came from. Make a long arm, Miss Patty, and hand them cakes. So we had to devote ourselves to the duties of the table. And Patty, holding the lid with one hand, pouring with another, supplied Father Christmas's wants with a heavy heart. At last he was satisfied. I said grace, during which he stood, and indeed he stood for some time afterwards with his eyes shut, I fancy under the impression that I was still speaking. He had just said a fervent amen, and reseated himself when my father put his head into the kitchen and made his remarkable statement. Old Father Christmas has sent a tree to the young people. Patty and I uttered a cry of delight, and we forthwith danced round the old man, saying, How nice! Oh, how kind of you! Which I think must have bewildered him, but he only smiled and nodded. Come along, said my father. Come, children, come, Reuben, come, Kitty. And he went into the parlor, and we all followed him. My godmother's picture of a Christmas tree was very pretty, and the flames of the candle were so naturally done in red and yellow that I always wondered that they did not shine at night. But the picture was nothing to the reality. We'd been sitting almost in the dark, for, as Kitty said, firelight was quite enough to burn at meal times. And when the parlor door was thrown open, and the tree, with lighted tapers on all the branches, burst upon our view, the blaze was dazzling, and threw such a glory around the little gifts and the bags of colored muslin, and with acid drops and pink rose drops and comfits inside, as I shall never forget. We all got something, and Patty and I, at any rate, believed that the things came from the stores of old Father Christmas. We were not undeceived even by his gratefully accepting a bundle of old clothes which had been hastily put together to form his present. We were all very happy, even Kitty, I think, though she kept her sleeves rolled up and seemed rather to grudge enjoying herself, a weak point in some energetic characters. She went back to her oven before the lights were out and the angel on top of the tree taken down. She locked up her present, a little workbox, at once. She often showed it off afterwards, but it was kept in the same bit of tissue paper till she died. Our presents certainly did not last so long. The old man died about a week afterwards, so we never made his acquaintance as a common personage. When he was buried, his little dog came to us. I suppose he remembered the hospitality he'd received. Patty adopted him, and he was very faithful. Puss always looked at him with favor. I hoped during our rambles together in the following summer that he would lead us at last to the cave where Christmas trees are dressed, but he never did. Our parents often spoke of his late master as Old Reuben, but children are not easily disabused of a favorite fancy, and in Patty's thoughts and in mine the old man was gratefully remembered as Old Father Christmas. Like I said, more of a actual story rather than a fairy tale. But yeah, that's all our stories we're going to go through tonight. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. We had sort of a really classic Russian traditional one at the beginning, the Babouscka, and then we had the little sillier, younger Santa Claus one in the middle, and then we had this very beautiful, lot more traditional literary kind of story about the imagination of children and sort of the spirit of Christmas. GS says, I love that story, beautiful. Yeah, I have found it incredibly touching. And again, this is the Children's Book of Christmas Stories. I think it's a beautiful story. I don't think that's a children's story. I don't think it's written like a children's story. I don't think it's, even for the time, I don't think it's written as a children's story. I feel like so much of it would not make sense, the kind of sense of dramatic irony and stuff they have as being children. just doesn't. Gio says, thank you, Rory. Good luck with your computer battery. My battery is fine. What's happening is my, this is the second one I've had too. My block here has frayed its wire and it's shorting, which does mean that if I don't figure out a solution to that by Thursday, I may not be able to stream Thursday. Although I should mention, I'm probably, unless something changes, I'm probably either way not live streaming on Thursday. The Spencer's partner, that's how you would probably know her if you know Spencer from back in April, Delaney Yvonne, who his graphic designer, very kindly made our logo for free. She was an absolute sweetheart for doing that. Has an art exhibit going on, and the ceremony, I think it's the closing ceremony actually, is this Thursday at 6 p.m. So I'm looking to go to that. If I do, obviously, I will put something up maybe pre-recorded, unless that becomes a problem, in which case there will be nothing on Thursday, and I will see you next Tuesday. But hopefully I'm able to put something together. It'll probably be pre-recorded. I think I'm probably going to read the story I was publishing over the summer on our webpage. If you haven't looked at our webpage, it's varietal-literature.ca. You can find links down below. And thank you so much for dropping by my cabin. I really appreciate you folks being here. And take care as you go to sleep tonight. Thank you so much, and have a good night.